Every socio-technical system has a set of safety rules, a list of procedures that need to be followed to keep us safe. But what if the system only functions safely, in reality, because people are constantly adapting the rules rather than working to them?
They might do this to cope with the tensions and contradictions that exist within a system, to deal with uncertainty, technical failure, demand outstripping supply, these kind of things. And staff might not even be aware that they're making these adaptations. But these everyday trade-offs or compromises are, in fact, what's keeping people safe most of the time.
FRAM works by uncovering and mapping these adaptations. It's a method that allows us to understand work as done, so how work is actually carried out, rather than how we assume or imagine it gets done. It asks what these trade-offs, these compromises are, how they interact with one another, and how they can be supported.
Let's look at a critical process in a UK hospital, perhaps managing the blood sugar levels of a patient. FRAM would begin by asking, what are the activities involved in managing a patient's blood sugar levels?
And we might say, well, someone needs to write a prescription for insulin, then there will be a double check of some kind, then finally the prescription will be administered to the patient.
These steps or activities are each mapped using FRAM's hexagon notation, free-floating without any hierarchy being imposed. We'd then examine the activities one by one. Let's take the writing of the prescription first. I'd ask you to tell me more about the process.
What's going on here? What's the variability that you frequently encounter while doing this step? And you might say, well, sometimes the prescription is written and other times it's issued verbally by the doctor and written up later by the nurse. And it's not really a failure in the system. It's just what sometimes happens.
And so we would document this as an example of variability. Prescriptions can be written or verbal and can be issued before or after being administered. Then we'd move on to the double checking step. Does it always get done? No. Why not?
And you'd say, well, we can't. We have two competing protocols. One says do the double check, but the other says we can't leave our patient's bedside.
Well, this is a bit awkward. You ask another nurse, could you please come over to do the double check with me? And they say, no, I'm terribly sorry, I can't leave my patient's bedside.
So sometimes you say that you simply shout across, or more commonly, you pick a time when your patient is stable and you leave them for 5 minutes to go into the double check. And whether or not the double check gets done also depends on the frequency of the dose and the type of drug.
You might say, if it's a common drug and it's not harmful, and you've already given it 4 times that day, you might skip the double check. But if there's a nurse you're unfamiliar with on duty, you might always leave your patient and do the double check with them.
So we're looking at and noting down performance variability. This variability usually creates success, but sometimes it creates failure. A verbal prescription can be misheard, someone forgets to write the prescription up, the double check doesn't take place because the nurse is busy, and unfortunately the patient ends up getting the wrong drugs.
However, in 99% of cases we achieve success and no one is harmed. And if we did it by the book, more people would be at risk because, well, we can't actually do it by the book.
So now we have our steps and our variabilities, and we can start connecting them to gain insight into what's going on. Every step has an input and an output and other aspects.
We can start to ask, are there connections between these steps? Do they influence one another in any way? And we might say, yes, issuing the prescription acts as an initiator for the double check to be done, but sometimes we can bypass steps too. When the double check doesn't take place, we go straight from the prescription being issued to the medicine being administered to the patient.
And this sometimes happens not because of a failure, but for good reasons. And FRAM helps the analyst to understand what these reasons are and allows them to decide if the reasons are genuine, and if so, how they can be strengthened. A genuine reason might be that a doctor is too busy to write a prescription, and the delay in giving the medication might be harmful to the patient.
Once information about this kind of adaptation is unlocked, FRAM can be used to enable staff to make the trade-off positively and safely.
And to come up with recommendations about how performance variability can be managed more effectively, to enable staff to monitor and anticipate issues and learn adaptive strategies for satisfactory outcomes.
And it isn't just in healthcare where FRAM can be used. FRAM has also been used in the aviation sector, in the railway industry, and in software development. This enabling approach can be applied to any industry or setting that features a social technical system.